All right, so you're the Democrat Party. You're down big in the polls to Trump. Biden is down big. You have less than 6 months to go, and you're losing in every swing state. It's looking like a landslide for Trump. None of the court cases that you're bogging him down with are appearing to do anything. If anything, they're counterproductive. The public is fed up with it. It's become such an obvious political persecution, whatever you want to call it, that if anything, it's making people more sympathetic to Trump's cause. What are your options in November? Now, of course, you always have option A. We all know what option A is for the Democrats, and that is steal the election again. Again. That's always reliable. But here's the thing. If they were hypothetically and unprecedentedly to attempt to rig the election in 2024, I'm still not convinced it would work. Because even to win by cheating, you still need to have the game slightly in reach. Like, if I'm playing one-on-one against LeBron James, there's probably no level of cheating I could be allowed to do that would make me win that game. Short of hog-tying him and throwing him in a broom closet while I stand at the free throw line and attempt to make 12 shots over an unlimited period of time, there's not really many scenarios where I could see myself beating LeBron James in a one-on-one game of basketball under any circumstances. Oh, I don't have to dribble. Okay, I'm still getting shut out. He can only shoot with his eyes closed. Still losing. So when it comes to Trump and Biden, when you're looking at leads this big in the swing states, that means that obviously the red states are locked, and there's no saying that some states couldn't be flipped. I mean, if the swing states are swaying this hard towards Trump with this much of a margin, we talked yesterday about why the swing states are so important, because they ultimately are the deciders of the election. Most states are going to go one way or the other, guaranteed, every election cycle. So it really comes down to a handful of states, and within those states, a handful of counties. You know, like I said, we looked at that election map. Pennsylvania was won by, a less than 1% margin by Biden. Same with Wisconsin. Same with Georgia. Same with Arizona, and probably some more states. Like, the one thing all these states had in common, besides all miraculously flipping to Biden overnight in 2020, is that they all were won by a very slim margin. In the thousands, maybe like 10,000, 20,000 votes on the high end for most of them. That's not a lot when you have millions of people voting. We're talking, like I said, less than 1% margins. So it's not really that out of the question at that time to get a few counties in said swing states. If this were the tactic, if their goal was to steal the election by manufacturing votes or whatever they did, in those specific highly populated, highly Democrat-leaning counties where they could actually string this together to produce the extra 11,000 votes needed to put Biden over the edge against Trump in Georgia, that could be done in one county. It was done. There was a lot of irregularities in multiple counties in Georgia, but particularly Fulton County, their most highly populated county, where Atlanta is. But that's a couple thousand. You can't really pull that off in any type of discrete fashion if Trump is blowing Biden out of the water in states like Nevada by 13%. You cannot pull a 26% swing or even a 14% swing in a state without it being obvious interference and fraud. You can't do that. Again, this isn't me saying that they are going to try. This isn't me saying that they've already tried. But this is me saying that if they were hypothetically holding in their back pocket some type of fuckery in 2024, similar to that what they were accused of in 2020, I still don't think they'd be able to pull it off. Because the level that they would have to go would be so far beyond obvious that they wouldn't be able to hide it this time. They wouldn't be able to get away with it. It would be too blatant. When the whole country, when we look at that opinion poll, and 72% of people in this country view the top 4 issues that are most pertinent to what Trump speaks to as the most important issue in their life. That's 3 in 4 people view issues that Trump speaks to, not Biden, as the most important thing in their life. When every single one of these swing states is leaning sometimes double-digit margins in Trump's favor in these New York Times polls. The idea that people are going to believe in November of this year that those states are still going to go Biden at the end of the day, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I will tell you this. I'm not saying for a fact that the election was stolen in 2020. I'm also not saying for a fact that it wasn't. We'll leave that up in the air. But I am saying this. If Joe Biden wins in 2024, this year, they stole the election. Hands down. If Joe Biden becomes president for another 4 years, after these 4 years, let there be no doubt that we do not live in a democracy. Your vote does not matter because the people of this country are not going to willingly put Joe Biden back in office. I know that. You know that. Everyone knows that. But especially, they know that. They know that. They know that this country, this whole situation, the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, the inflation out of control, the shitty economy, the unchecked border, everything. They know that things have gotten so fucking bad. Not only can they not even, they're thinking of alternatives to holding their own Democratic convention. Not because of protesters on the Trump side interfering with it, but protesters from their own side. Protesters from their own side. The pro-Palestine, ultra-left, progressive, radical side of the Democratic aisle, they're afraid are going to obviously target the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. And now the Democrats, many people in the higher up positions on the Biden team are considering doing a hybrid virtual style convention. That's just the division within their own party. The Trump side doesn't even care enough to do that. The Trump side's partying in fucking Wildwood at a Trump rally last weekend, having a great time, loving this country, wanting to put him back in power to get it back where he should be. And then you got, like I said, the Democrats who are afraid to even hold a public event out of fear of it being obstructed and broken down by their own base. And we're supposed to believe that a party who is not even stable enough to confidently hold a public convention under threat of their own base showing up to ruin it or protest against it, we're supposed to believe that that party is going to win again in 2024? There is no possible way. I'm sorry. So there are really two options now. Because stealing the election is not even an option, even if they wanted it to be an option. I mean, I guess it's still an option. But just know that, again, if Joe Biden wins, you'll know the election is stolen. Everyone will know the election is stolen. This country, I'm not encouraging it. I'm not saying I want to see this. But there is just no possible way things remain peaceful in this country that I can imagine if Biden wins again. Because again, it would be right in your fucking face. People already don't trust the 2020 election. People are already pissed off that it's looking like we're never going to be allowed to get to the bottom of that. But 2024, dude? Nah. It's game on. I was going to say game over. No, it's game on. If they pull that shit again in 2024. There's no getting away with it this time. It's too blatant. So for all intents and purposes, in terms of stealing the election is off the table this time around. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Democrats. You're going to have to come up with a new strategy. What about not making Biden the nominee? We talked earlier about how the Democrats, they're already starting to kind of jump ship. And they have been for a while, but especially after these polls, they have been. Like I mentioned in part one, it's gotten so obviously bad in terms of the polling and in terms of just the general sentiment in this country that they can't even pretend it's not. You know how they can tell you, like the same way they can tell you that like inflation is actually doing great right now, even though it's not at all, obviously, according to you and everyone you know and your bank account. And so they're not really able to do that. Well, they're not really able to pretend that the current state of politics in this country is that nobody fucks with Joe Biden. And so at this point, probably a more sensible and increasingly more realistic option of theirs is to swap him out. For one reason or another, they're going to have to. I'm not saying they're going to do this. I'm saying if they want to win, if they want to have any chance of winning, let's say, it ain't going to be with Joe Biden. I don't believe that they have a chance at all, personally, in a free and fair election. But if they want any shooting star, glimmer in the sky, prayer on the wings of a dove chance of winning, they're going to have, it's just too far gone with Biden. And so who do you swap in there? A lot of people say Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom's certainly been the guy that they have been kind of keeping like in their back pocket. Like he's just one of those guys that you've been like hearing from more, especially last year. he was like the left's Ron DeSantis, basically. Like Ron DeSantis, everybody on the right had a fucking boner for Ron DeSantis during COVID. Everybody in Florida especially. And then he decided to try to primary Trump, and then everybody on the right was like, dude, we liked you, but we don't like you that much. If you're going to make this a choice between you or Trump, it's going to be Trump all day. And so Ron DeSantis kind of screwed himself, and I think Gavin Newsom was going to be the guy for the left, or like just like I think they're just keeping him just enough in the public eye so that if they need him, it doesn't seem out of the blue, you know? Like if he was to be called as like that, because it would be weird to just like magically be like, you know, obviously all these people are selected by the party. They're kind of like tapped on the shoulder, metaphorically speaking, with the fucking golden sword of the Democratic establishment to be like, okay, you have towed the line and carried our water for the past 20 years and you've elevated up the chain of command, you know, because these parties are like working at the fucking restaurant. You start out as a host, then you become a busboy, then become a server, then become a manager. Then it's like, you know, you're getting promoted up the line. And then, you know, eventually if you're enough of a company guy, that puts you up for president. And Gavin Newsom's been enough of a company man. You know, he's a governor of California. He's failed his way on up from there, you know, eating dinner at the French Laundry with no mask on while the state's locked down. Like just insane shit that like from COVID, just like people don't forget about that. They don't. But the left does. But he's there and they're kind of bringing him up a little bit to be like, all right, stay on this level. Don't say you're coming through the throne. You're not going to primary Biden. But just be in the game a little bit. Be in the public eye so that if we need you, if we need to call you off the bench, it doesn't seem like obviously you were hand selected by the party to do so. So people are like, oh, yeah, I feel like I have been hearing more about Gavin Newsom. He's definitely been trying to do something as opposed to the obvious, which is he's next in line. And then, of course, you have, and this is real. Michelle Obama. Now, don't ask me why. Michelle Obama seems to be like in the top 3 candidates for potential replacement of Joe Biden in the Democratic Party this election cycle, according to all those in the know. My sources. But she is. Because as we know, as we learned from Hillary Clinton, who was routinely touted in 2016 as the most qualified candidate to ever seek the position of presidency. Hillary Clinton's qualifications prior to Bill Clinton becoming the governor of Arkansas were fucking Bill Clinton. After Bill Clinton became the president, Hillary Clinton, as first lady, magically just started having like actual say and governmental roles. Then she became a senator from New York State. Then she became Secretary of State in the Obama administration. And then she became a 2-time failed presidential candidate. But again, I mean, I'm not saying she didn't have, like, I'm sure she went to a nice school. I'm sure she's like some type of lawyer of some sort. Every one of them is. But as far as like political experience, she married Bill Clinton and then just fell into political power as a result of that. And that makes her, you know, I was first lady for 8 years, where I handled things that were like way beyond what I should have been handling as just the person who's married to the president. Bill Burr has a great bit about that. You know, you call a plumber and he comes over and he's looking at your pipes and things, and then his wife is over there giving you her opinion. It's like, why are you, just because you're the plumber's wife, you know about plumbing? You know? Like, but for some reason, when it comes to plumbing and your car mechanic or your accountant or any other thing, the airplane pilot, hey guys, sorry, the pilot couldn't make it today, but luckily his wife is going to fly the plane. Oh, okay, well, yeah, she's a pilot, right? Well, no, she's just married to the pilot. And that, of course, makes her qualified to fly a plane. So at no other point in life does that make sense, unless you're the president of the United States. If you are the leader of the free world, then by definition, your wife is also qualified to handle a bunch of things that she was not elected to handle. Now, granted, you know, John F. Kennedy made his brother head of some commissions or whatever. I don't know, whatever. It happens for everybody. It's just part of the game. My point is not that it shouldn't be allowed. Because also, you know, being a first lady doesn't make you unqualified to do things. I'm just speaking to the idea that it, for some reason, to a lot of people, does make you qualified. The point being is, you know, you have a woman who had a couple responsibilities during her husband's 8-year presidency. Then she became a senator for a few years, and then she became Secretary of State. And then that was touted as the highest level of qualification of anybody who's ever sought the role of president, which I cannot imagine is true. Michelle Obama, she, believe it or not, is married to Barack Obama, and Barack Obama was a president for 8 years. So Michelle Obama, therefore, is a top contender to be the next president of the United States. That's how that works, by the way. I hate to say it, but that would probably be the biggest threat to Trump. I still don't think it'll be enough at this point. I think at this point it would be such an obvious, I don't know, like just a gimmick, I guess you would say. Because Michelle Obama hasn't expressed any desire to run for president that I'm aware of, at least in this election cycle. There hasn't really been much talk about it other than like speculation that it's a possibility. So I think people would see right through it. Even on the left, they'd be like, oh, really? What the fuck? This is like embarrassing. But I think she'd do better than Biden. You know, I mean, that was Biden's whole thing. How many votes did Biden get? You know, not just because he wasn't Trump, but I guess for a very small minority of people because he was Obama's vice president. That's like, I would say that was probably like 20% of Biden's votes came from him being Obama's vice president, and the other 80 came from him not being Trump. And the other 20 came from fake votes, which is why he had 120% turnout. But that's what you're looking at. But Michelle Obama, people know, well, holy shit. If Hillary Clinton was allowed to do all this shit when Bill Clinton was president, then Barack Obama would be the first man, the first gentleman, or whatever you call it, if Michelle is president. And then basically we just have another 4 to 8 years of Obama again, right? I mean, how much differently is Michelle Obama going to run the country than Barack? Do you think they're lying in bed at the end of every day, having major disagreements on the political way of this country? You think Barack's like, no, let me be clear. I really think you should sign that bill, Michelle. And she's like, Barack, no way. I'm signing a completely different bill because even though we are married and have agreed on everything ever, if I'm president, it's going to be totally a different thing than if you were president. No. The thing that Michelle Obama has going for her is that she's Barack Obama's wife. Right? And that means that it's now Obama versus Trump. And that one, that would be a more entertaining matchup. And let me tell you this also while we're here. That is the only one that I would say opens up the gate if they wanted to attempt to steal the election again, if they wanted to attempt to rig the election for definitely the first time ever and not in 2020. She's probably the only candidate that people might be willing to fall for the narrative that it wasn't rigged if she wins. They could create a narrative around that enough to sell a stolen election, potentially. And that's what I think people aren't thinking about. It's not so much that Michelle Obama legitimately beats Trump in an election. It's whether or not Michelle Obama could be believed to beat Trump in an election. Like it's on the table as like a possibility. Because as long as that is the case, then you can do whatever you have to do to make it happen and then tell people that that's what happened. As I said earlier, that doesn't apply to Biden because people aren't even willing to believe at this point that it's possible for him to win. There's people that may want him to win, but I don't think anybody thinks he's going to. So Michelle Obama seems to be the best pick for the Democrats. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't. It's just I feel like it's kind of an embarrassing state that this country's in, where we've almost resorted to like human beings. Society has a tendency towards monarchy, royalty. You know, you look at Britain and you're like King Charles, and and then he has like every descendant is the prince and the queen and the princess and whatever. And then you look at our country, it's like, oh, the Bushes, the Kennedys, the Clintons, the Obamas. Like, we just have like certain families that are just like royalty. Like, George H.W. Bush was president in the early 90s, late 80s. And then his son, George Bush, is president 8 years later. And then in 2016, they try to run George Bush's brother, Jeb Bush, one of the worst candidates. So bad, I almost felt sorry for him. He just seemed like just kind of a doofy guy. I'm sure a fine guy, honestly. But he just, his qualification for being president was he's a Bush. And then again, Bill Clinton in the 90s, and then suddenly Hillary Clinton is the most qualified person ever because she's a Clinton. And then, the Kennedys just became this political dynasty. Not saying anything wrong with the Kennedys necessarily. Now you have Robert F. Kennedy running now. That obviously has a lot to do with him being a Kennedy. I'm sure it doesn't hurt. That, and he's a cool dude. That is just a reality of this country. You just get certain allegiance, royalty, like king, queen level allegiance to certain families that you thought that we were above, but we're really not. Celebrity culture is kind of our royalty, and that's also what determines our politics in a lot of cases. I wouldn't be surprised if, Trump's kids wind up running for president and, someday and have a substantial base just because they're Trumps. you know? But the point being is I think the thing that people aren't discussing is the Democrats may be at a point now where they're not necessarily concerned with how to win fairly. They're concerned with how they could reasonably win unfairly, because right now, again, they can't even reasonably win unfairly. And I think if that's what you're shooting for, if you're shooting for a believable, unfair victory, Michelle Obama's your ticket. You can work that narrative, you can work that angle, and people would probably accept it. And then, of course, there's option 3, which is you just keep on trying to sabotage Trump, but that's not working. And so what's the final option there? You said it, not me. It wouldn't be the first time that a president was killed in this country. Assassinated, that is. And won't be the last. Just because it hasn't happened in 50, 60 years. Mind you, Reagan was shot at in the 80s. So that's like 40 years ago. Look, I don't necessarily enjoy talking about it. I won't enjoy talking about it if it was Biden. I wouldn't enjoy talking about it if it was anybody. I don't think that assassinating someone is a viable solution in a presidential race. But it certainly is an option. And if there's one thing we know about this country and the people in high levels of power that are pulling the majority of the strings in media and politics, is they really, really, really do not want Trump to be president. And they are running out of ways to keep that from happening. So the question then becomes, are they willing to take it that far? I genuinely think 2016 was a surprise to them. I think that if they knew Trump had a chance, they would have probably cheated him out of it. But I think they were so high on their own supply. I think they bought their own lie. I think they drank their own Kool-Aid so hard that they were legitimately floored when they realized that not everyone in the country is an Upper East Side college-educated white chick that watches Sex and the City and, hates Trump. I think they were shocked to see how tone deaf they were, truly, to Americans in general. That meant I was shocked to see it. I was legitimately shocked in 2016 when he won. And I did vote for him in 2016, and I was still shocked. Because I didn't really believe in our system. I did really think that the elections were rigged even then. And so when Trump won, I was like, well, there ain't no way our elections were rigged this time, because there ain't no way they would have rigged it for him. Like, this definitely proves that our elections are fair. But I just didn't, all I had seen was, at the time, everybody said SJW, Social Justice Warrior compilation, and, just everybody, it was just, like I said, at that time, everything was just politicized, and all the mainstream narratives were anti-Trump, anti-this, anti-conservative, and I was kind of tricked into believing that I was in this fringe minority of people that by sympathizing with Trump, by sympathizing with the conservative movement, that I was in the minority. And when I saw that that wasn't the case, it kind of like opened my eyes, not just to the fact that our system still can work, but also that this whole idea of, you know, people who sympathize with Trump or conservative values are this kind of like extremist fringe minority. That's all gaslighting. That's all gaslighting. Like I said, you can't have a guy get more votes for president than any other presidential candidate in history, except for Joe Biden, apparently, that same year, and then also call his supporters a fringe minority or an extremist minority or something like that. Half the country, or should I say half the voting population, does not constitute a minority necessarily, and it certainly does not constitute a fringe in any way, shape, or form. But that's how strongly the media was geared towards creating a narrative to make you think that you were the only person alive that felt the way you did. When in reality, just as we were looking at these polls about what people care about, you know, immigration, poor leadership in the government, the economy, inflation, and so on, those being the top 4 issues for Americans. And then, you know, the issues that they tell you that everybody cares about, abortion, climate change, racism, whatever, those are like the bottom issues in terms of what Americans care most about. But you would be, if, you know, you would believe it was the reverse. If you only ever watched the news, if you only ever watched corporate media, if you only ever watched, you know, late night shows or any, you know, Hollywood movie, any band, any award show, any sporting event, any of these things, all you see is, and this group is doing this, and I just want to say before I accept this award that we need to fight for women's rights and blah, 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 and like all that shit. Meanwhile, the average American is sitting there watching it being like, I can't believe so many people care about abortion so much. I can't believe that so many people care about climate change. And the truth is, they don't. They actually literally don't. A small, very vocal, very powerful group of people wants you to think that this is what people care about, because they are unable to win on any of the issues that people actually do care about. That's what gaslighting is. That's literally the definition of gaslighting. I want you to think this, because if you knew the truth, I wouldn't be able to get what I want from you. Is there a better definition of gaslighting anyone can hand me? And that's what's happening. This is a national gaslighting. And much like the whole stolen election thing, potentially, if they were to attempt that in 2024 and it would be too obvious, if you thought that was going to be bad, dude, if they were to assassinate Trump, like either leading up to the election or during his term, holy shit. That would be a civil war, right? That would have to. There are a handful of things that I can think of off the top of my head that I think would legitimately start a civil war in this country. And when I say a handful of things, I can think of one thing as the biggest thing, that is. If Trump gets assassinated, whether he's a president or not, I don't know.